Broadway actor Robert Spencer. It's all his hits. But a few of them have to do with me, and you may have read some of those things. And that actually is the topic of our talk tonight, is resistance to jihad and Islamic supremacism, a right-wing issue. And you may have read that I'm a right-wing guy who does all sorts of terrible right-wing things. And so I wanted in the first place to show you that I actually do not have wings, and that the rumors to the contrary are entirely false. But in all seriousness, this is a very severe impediment across the board in our society today to resisting the threat that the global jihad poses, and that is that it has become a polarizing and polarized issue on the American public square, in the American public square, such that people think that they cannot take certain positions or should not be associating with certain people, or can't come to see certain people speak because they would be on the wrong side of the political fence. And so let's think about that. Now, in the first place, there has been some resistance to this talk tonight, as some of you well know. But this isn't about me or about this talk tonight in particular. It's a larger question. And the larger question has to do with, well, is it really only right-wingers who care about jihad terrorism and Islamic supremacism? And if so, is that a bad thing? And in the first place, to situate that question, we should step back for a minute and ask, well, what is it that makes people afraid of something that is right-wing and want to be identified with something that's on the left to begin with? And of course, obviously there are many people who feel just the opposite way and wouldn't want to have anything to do with anyone who was left-wing and would want to identify with someone on the right. But the question before us is about the left, and so it's really actually quite easy to understand, without getting into an entire social history of the left and the right as social and political phenomena, we can go back just as far as the civil rights movement. And we can see that in the popular mind, and to a very tremendous degree, this was entirely accurate, that the left was identified with justice, with equality of rights for all people, with the equal treatment of all people before the law, whereas the right was the force of racism, bigotry, reaction, and hatred. And the Jim Crow laws that were in the American South in those days were upheld by people who identified themselves as being on the right and thought that because of race that certain basic rights could be denied to entire classes of people. And it was the left that opposed all that. Nowadays, we find that this controversy is situated in the mainstream media in entirely the same way, exactly the same way. That there is an entire group of people, namely Muslims in the United States, that right-wingers supposedly want to deny basic rights out of an overreaction toward and a hyper-suspicion that arose from the 9/11 attacks. And that is more than a little bit tinged with racism and bigotry, because after all, most Muslims in the United States are immigrants and are brown-skinned people from Arabian or Central Asian countries. Now, is that, however, an accurate assessment? In the first place, one distinction that has to be made is that when we are talking about jihad terrorism, and when we are talking about Islamic supremacism, by which I mean the imperative that is enunciated by many Muslim leaders around the world, and this is readily verifiable, readily establishable on the internet at any given moment, who say Islam is going to take over the world, Islam is going to conquer the non-Muslim regions of the world. Specifically, I can tell you Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is the most prominent and famous and influential Muslim leader in the entire world, and one of the leading lights of the Muslim Brotherhood that's now taking over in Egypt. He's also a TV preacher on Al Jazeera, and he commands a huge audience of millions around the world. And he has said Islam is going to conquer Europe and America and Islamize the two. Now, when we speak about Islamic supremacism and jihad, We're not talking about a race. There are people of all races who hold to the idea that, as Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, said, Islam must dominate and not be dominated. Islam must rule and not be ruled. Or, as Sheikh Abdullah Maududi said, Maududi was a Pakistani Jihad theorist who died in 1979. And he is the founder, he was the founder, of Jamaat-e-Islami, which is still the largest Islamic supremacist political party, pro-Islamic law political party in Pakistan. He said that non-Muslims have absolutely no right to wield the reins of power, that is to govern, to rule, in any part of God's earth. And if they do, the Muslims have the obligation to dislodge them from that power by any means possible.